So we'll now move on to the main topic here, which is XBRL Formula. I'm joined by Harald Schmitt, who is the Head of Product Development from ABZ Reporting. And we'll be talking about the future of XBRL Formula. I will talk about the topic of OIM Formula and the future in Formula in general. And then Harald's going to talk about what's previously been called XF, which is text-based formula, which I'll explain in a bit more detail in just a moment. Thanks. So, XBRL Formula development reached something of a fork in the road. It was recognized that XBRL Formula is really powerful. The ability to embed validation rules into your taxonomy in a standard format and publish those in a way that preparers, regulators, anyone can run and evaluate and get the same results is really powerful. It's a key feature of XBRL. And it's backed by really strong infrastructure that we have at XBRL International, a conformance suite. We've now got software certification testing. So there's a lot that's really powerful about XBRL Formula, but it faces multiple challenges. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but fundamentally we've reached a point where we need to make a decision. Are we going to carry on evolving the existing platform, or do we need to make a more radical change? So this was the decision that was in front of us earlier this year. And just to go into some of those specific challenges, the first one that I think actually isn't the most important one, but it's the most obvious one, is that the formula syntax is very cumbersome to work with. The XML-based syntax makes it very hard to write, makes it very hard to read. XBRL Formula, as it stands at the moment, was developed in about 2008 originally, so naturally it's tied to XML, the XML syntax, and it's based around XML technology. And we now have XBRL JSON, XBRL CSV, and the Open Information Model, which is a syntax-independent model for XBRL, and being tied to XML is now proving to be a hindrance. We're also seeing performance issues in some environments, owing to the size of the data that people are trying to process with formulas. And also, we can't write all the rules that we want to, and there's some specific functionality that's missing that prevents that. One of those is limited ability to access taxonomy information rather than fact information. And also, without going into the details, limited fact alignment features. There's certain operations that are quite cumbersome to do when you're trying to align facts along specific dimensions and slice the facts up in different ways. And that curly bracket that PowerPoint screwed up for me was meant to be around those first 2 points. In the US, Campbell Pride and the Data Quality Committee, have developed the US data quality rules, and they rely heavily on the ability to do those first two things, which, as you'll hear in a moment, is why they don't use XBRL Formula for their US data quality rules. So we were looking at the options for Formula and realized actually it's not so much a fork in the road as something more like this junction, which is a famous junction in the UK called Spaghetti Junction, because we've got actually a whole range of formula solutions and problems in circulation. We have XF, which you'll be hearing more about from Harald, which is a text-based syntax for formula that already exists. We've got the need to develop OIM Formula, which I will talk about in a lot more detail in just a moment. As I mentioned, Campbell's team were unable to use Formula for what they needed to write and develop Zool, an alternative approach. We've also got discussion of table-based formula. How can we best apply formula rules to the sort of tabular, high-volume data? And then there was discussion about, well, what would evolving formula look like? Do we just need more filters or more functions? Should we be looking at XPath 3? We're currently using XPath 2 for our expressions. XPath 3 has been around for a while. Should we be using that? Would it solve some of our problems? So we were faced with all these different discussions, all these different possible ways forward, and we decided what we should do is we should have a meeting. So we did. We had a meeting in Oxford early this year. And after a couple of days of very constructive discussion, we reached a sort of two-phase plan. The first part in the short term, and I should emphasize this is short term in sort of specification timescales, which means, yeah, it'll take longer than we'd hoped. But nonetheless, the short term plan is what we're referring to as Formula 2.0. And that involves a rapid standardization, formalization of XF, the text-based formula language, and development and finalization of the OIM formula specification. But that's the short term. Long term is we want to do XBRL Rules 3.0. We agreed that and this is the key thing really, that the next major release of formula should not be based on the current foundations. We should do something fundamentally different. We did consider modernizing with XPath 3.0, and we looked at the various options, but actually, given that we have no real desire to be tied to XML, and we are only using XPath as an expression language, not using it to actually navigate XML documents, tying ourselves to XPath doesn't make a lot of sense. And that last point that I glossed over about the fact alignment issues, that's actually going to be pretty hard to solve within the current framework. It's a fundamental feature of the formula processing model as it stands at the moment. So the Formula 3.0 plan, or XBRL Rules 3.0 as we're planning to call it, is to make a clean break, and it's expected to draw heavily on the experience gained from XBRL US's Zool language, and Campbell will be telling us more about that in the next session. And naturally, XBRL Rules 3.0 will be natively OIM compatible, be built around that syntax independent model, and is expected to drive the development of the OIM taxonomy model, which is the next thing on the agenda for the OIM working group. I'll let Campbell talk about that in the next session. We need to go that. So going back to the short-term plan, I mentioned that's XF and OIM Formula, and I'd like to talk now just quickly about OIM Formula. OIM Formula is about making our existing formula rules executable on non-XML based documents, so XBRL CSV and XBRL JSON. And we've got a particular eye on XBRL CSV because the EBA are planning to adopt XBRL CSV for their filing, and they need to be able to write rules that will run on those documents. Now, in theory, this problem is actually solved because we've got specifications to tell you how to turn CSV into XML, the old XBRL 2.1 syntax, and the formula specification tells us how to apply XBRL formula rules to that XBRL 2.1 syntax. So in theory, you can run formula rules on those reports. But obviously, that's not the best processing model. It'd be much better if we can run the rules directly on XBRL CSV and XBRL JSON. And in particular, the one thing we want to avoid is requiring processes to build an XML model. We don't want them to have to operate on an XML document, even if it's just in memory at all. And as I mentioned just now, although we use XPath as the expression language, most of the rules and the way that we use XPath isn't tied to XML documents. We just use it really to describe the test expression that we want. The actual fact selection, choosing which facts are going to be involved in the rule, is done using XBRL specific filters. And a lot of the processing in the expressions actually is done with using XBRL specific functions. So quite often the only thing that we're using XPath for is like adding up or comparing and testing, certainly not being used to select things from the document. So we're building this XML DOM, this document object model we don't really want or need. But in order to get rid of it, we need to get agreement on exactly which formula rules can be run without the DOM. So there are already processes on the market actually that will do this. And where possible, they will evaluate an expression without building the DOM and will do so if it needs to. What we want to do is get to a situation where we've got common agreement about whether a given formula rule can be executed without an XML document object model. So what OIM does is it restricts use of features that would require an XML document and places those restricted features where they're actually deemed to be necessary with alternative OIM compatible functionality. So the key things that we're doing when we're doing that restriction, and the most obvious one of those is no XPath node navigation. You're not allowed to take an XBRL fact and say, well, what is the parent of this fact? Given the nature of XBRL documents, that's never really a very useful thing to be able to do because they're flat documents, so you always know what the parent is anyway. But so navigating between nodes is not actually a useful or desirable thing to do. But once we've restricted it, once we've agreed that we're not doing that, then we don't need to hold that document object model in memory. Prohibiting certain functions that are again tied to XML elements, and it provides new functions to replace the operations that do currently rely on XPath navigation. And it's important to say that OIM Formula is important to ensure taxonomy interoperability. And what I mean by that is getting agreement that a given set of rules are OIM compatible. So, for example, when the EBA publishes their taxonomy, we can all agree that these rules can be executed in what we call OIM mode. All processes agree on that. And then they can all be evaluated, get the same result in all processes. So OIM Formula defines this OIM mode. When a processor is in OIM mode, it only supports OIM compatible reports. I should stress that that can include XML documents, XBRL XML documents, as long as they are OIM compatible, which means no tuples and a few other features that are ruled out in the OIM constraints. When in this mode, the processor will only support the OIM compatible formula rules, and of course you have no access to the XML model. So, where are we currently? Well, these are the things that we needed to do as part of building the specification. It's been, as always, it's taken longer than we'd hoped. Conceptually, it's quite simple. We can describe what we want quite quickly, but at a specification level, what we're doing is we're effectively patching an existing specification. We're taking bits of the spec and say, oh, where it says that, you need to do something different now when you're in OIM mode. So it's been quite awkward to specify, but we're now pretty much there. We've got a complete public working draft. It's out there. It was published in July. And we're now working on developing a conformance suite of tests for both the OIM restricted mode and also for the new OIM functions. Which I'll mention just quickly now. The specification introduces 31 new functions. They're split into two categories. We've got the F functions and the R functions. The F functions are for accessing fact level things, particularly OIM fact properties like period, or you can ask, has this F has got dimension, does this fact have this dimension? And these all work in an OIM centric way. So we view built-in dimensions of concept and period and unit as dimensions, just like taxonomy defined dimensions. So you can use the has dimension function to ask about built-in dimensions as well as taxonomy defined dimensions. So everything that's introduced in these functions very much follows the OIM model, and actually I think gives a very clean base for writing formula rules. I quite like how the rules look once you start using these functions. So yeah, well, I mentioned the F functions. We've also got the R functions that let you do report level things like get a full list of facts or get distinct values of a dimension, that kind of thing. These functions will only work in OIM mode. So if you want to write rules that work on non-OIM compatible documents, you won't be able to use these functions. But these do replace the functions that you might need that are no longer allowed when you're in OIM mode. So, as I mentioned, we're currently at PWD status. We're working on a conformance suite. Once we have that, we'll be putting out a candidate recommendation. And at that point, we will be definitely looking for support from software vendors for early implementations of those functions and the specification itself. But hopefully that will be coming in the coming weeks. The performance suite is now mostly there. So, just to summarize, the two-stranded approach that we agreed in Oxford was a short-term XBRL Formula 2.0 plan of XF and OIM Formula, and then XBRL Rules 3.0, which we see as the strategic replacement for what we have currently. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to Harald, who's going to tell us a bit more about XF.
Thanks, Paul. So I'd like to welcome you also to this short presentation about XF. It's my pleasure to tell you something what is really, really easy, and the heavy lifting was done by Paul. But before I start that, I also want to tell you one thing is, I'm not only working for ABZ with a certified XBRL processor, but I'm also part of the Formula working group and other working groups. And that's because I'm a bit lazy and a bit selfish, because you see, we are doing lots of complicated stuff here. And at the end, we have to implement that. And if my feedback, maybe what I have, I did not give it, and I'm just seeing what was done, and I don't like it, I have to implement it. That's the name of the game. So I would welcome you to be also a bit selfish and join the working groups and give your feedback before you have to implement the things that we do. Yeah. So please do that. So with that said, I want to give some quick words about XF, and you already heard some stuff from Paul, but you probably have the question, what is that?
Wrong way.
Oh, wrong way. Yeah. So what is that XF? What a new acronym? What can it be? So probably it's XBRL Formula language. So that was very easy one, and it's just an alternative syntax for XBRL formulas. There's nothing new, nothing crazy about it. We are just trying to get things that are somehow a bit cryptic when you open a formula link base, to have that in a concise and easy to read syntax. So because we saw the problem that regulators said that is not easy to maintain. That is not really the thing that we wanted to have. So this was originally published as an informal working group note, so no spec. No spec is not as good as a spec. We try to work on that. But before I go into that, probably you want to know how does it look like. And maybe if you take a look and you already maybe have some skills here, you might spot what is this about. There's some assertion which has given a name, which is balance sheet equality, and there's somehow 3 variables defined, and at the end there's something which testing that the first variable is equal to the sum of the next 2 variables, and that is asset equals equity and liabilities. I hope it's easy to read. I hope it's easy to spot. And because I'm lazy, that is the syntax based on the first working group note. Experts will see there are some nasty semicolons at the end of the lines. And of course, they are not necessary. We strip them, we drop them because they are not that necessary. And software is able to read these syntax even without this. And there are some more tweaks which were applied to this first version of XF. But what else can be done? What features are there for XF? Nothing special actually in this example, because I'm from Germany. I just wanted to give you a message even in German language, so that the position should not be used anymore. That's just an easy example, not maybe the complicatedest in the world, but it's an easy one, and you can specify languages or error messages in the languages which you desire. Of course, this was possible with the XBRL Formula in link-based format before, but that's it. That's the clue. It's nothing new. It's the same basically, but you can do it in a much more concise and easy to read syntax. Paul already talked about OIM, so you might ask yourself, is it covered in this language too? Yes, it is, because it's easy to cover it. We have these functions which we gave an F prefix because it's about facts. So and we're just here asserting, I don't know if you can spot it, that the LEI scheme is used. So, and actually, because I'm lazy, that was automatically converted from the EZEF formulas. We have spotted or implemented the working group node And I just had to remove the semicolons and replace this XFI function with the F function and add the code. So I have a nicer example and show that we support also OEM. So nothing special about it, but it's easy to read, in my opinion, and you have some more benefits about it. So I hope you already spotted some of the benefits. The readability, of course. But if you're a developer and you want to version some things, probably you put some taxonomies in the versioning system, and next time you spoon up your taxonomy editor and the last line is now the first line, or you don't have line breaks at all, then yeah, you have always the whole document is one change. So this is much nicer with this XF syntax because you have line-based format, and you can just put it in your Git or whatever versioning system you have, and have a nice trace and a nice history of the changes which you did, which is a good thing. We have included some mechanisms to split the assertion to multiple files. So you could maybe by topic have functions which deal with the balance sheet. You can have assertions, which deal with the income statement, or you could even do it like EBA does, one file, or at the moment I don't know how many files per assertion, but it's also splittable across multiple files. You have the same expressive power as formula link base. That's I want to stress, so I try to repeat it multiple times, so you remember that. And of course, there is or you can implement an automatable conversion between XF and formula link base. So they are just the same, just a different syntax, but in our opinion, much nicer syntax, which has the benefits I try to explain. So actually, that's the easy thing. You see nothing special, nothing you have to be afraid of. But if you have some comments about it, now it's the time to give them and to give join the working group and work on that. So what is next on XF? So it's on formal track as a specification. It accompanies OIM formulas. You saw that we have that covered in the syntax. We even have the node navigation from XPath stripped out. So you have some kind of validation of the XPath language there too. And probably there are some more ideas to have even a more concise syntax. There are some few more ideas how we can maybe make this syntax even more concise. But basically that's it, and I hope you're ready to implement and to do maybe a small proof of concept from this nice little syntax.
Thank you very much, Harald. I just wanted to pick up on one comment, which was the suggestion that I'd done the heavy lifting on XF. Actually, the real heavy lifting on XF was done by Herm Fischer and a chap called Andrew Perkins from Workiva. And they, working together, developed XF as this alternative syntax for XBRL Formula and got an initial implementation in RL. So the credit really needs to go to them. I have to say I was amazed at just how much better it made things. And I'd always been critical of the formula syntax. I hadn't realized just how much it could be improved with an alternative syntax. So it's very impressive on that front. And from personal experience, I built the simple LEI taxonomy that validates the format and structure of LEIs when used as an identifier. And for that, I built them in XF and just used RL to convert them to link-based format as the publication step. And it just made a world of difference to writing those rules. So with that, any questions?
So I agree that the XF really looks really nice, but well, not but well, the structure is a tree, like assertion, and then there are the variables, and then the filters behind that. In a formula link base, you would see everything top level on Xlink to tie everything together, which is cumbersome. But the only benefit would be like reuse of this one filter can be used over all these assertions. I guess that in practice, that reuse doesn't happen, so you could just as well nest it. So would you say that if you would try to round trip from a formula link base to XF back to formula, then you might get some duplication? Do I understand that correctly? If you would do that exercise?
Yeah, it depends on the implementation, but yes, you can have then files that are looking different. I think that's always the case with formula. Also with XPath, you can specify things in really multiple ways, which is sometimes good, but most of the times it's not so nice, because also analyzing formulas, if you try to do that, is a bit harder. But the important thing is, I think actually what we did run with our processor the conformance suite with the table link base, and then we converted it to XF and run it. We had the same results, and we converted it back to formula link base, and we got the same results again. So we are sure that the same things happen, and on expressive power, it's the same. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you specify it in other, let's say, syntax. So we generally trying to move away from this highly syntax bound specification.
And one thing, so I am in the formula working group, so I should have known this, but is this text then embedded still in a link-based file, or is it a completely separate file? I did not dive into this topic.
Yes, this is a text-based file, and it's
separate file. Right.
Separate file. And yeah, how to use it, how to reference that from a taxonomy, that's I think different.
Yeah, and actually that's one of the things that we're planning to do as part of Formula 2.0 is make it possible to directly reference XF files from the taxonomy. At the moment, if you wanted to use XF, you'd have to convert it into link-based syntax in order to publish it. So that's one of the things we want to do as part of XF. And to your previous question, that's a very good point. I've never actually considered that, but I think you're right, that if you had shared a filter between assertions, then that would unavoidably end up in them duplicated as part of the round tripping. Yeah.
Thank you. I think I understand correctly that now XF is used to basically mimic the capabilities of the formula link base. Is there in the future also the idea to figure out if XF can be used to express formulas that are now in the filing rules, for instance, for certain taxonomies? Or is there a plan to extend the syntax to include functions that could maybe do those kind of things?
I think this is part of the Formula 3.0, and of course, I think if it's accepted, and I think it will be a success, XF, of course, then it's considered to be updated to reflect these changes. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I think there's not a plan to do that as part of XF itself, but we could always add new functions that extend the capability. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I'd like to understand what was maybe the idea behind making it a text-based format rather than maybe something like JSON, for which there are parsers that exist, right? I mean, it's not a huge job to make a parser for a text-based, but still, if you wanted to make something compact and readable, I would have thought JSON was maybe an option.
Yeah, I think first one thing is that so XBRL Formula is based on XPath, and there existed already let's say a grammar for this XPath expressions. So it was an easier step to actually write it in the same way. And actually, the result, I think it's nice. and it was only published as a working group note, and lately it was picked up to see that it's valuable, and people want to use it. And yeah, you could also specify something in JSON, but I think this syntax looks nice and it's understandable by business users, even, in my opinion. So that's the reason.
And I think it's a case of treating it like program code, which is effectively text-based syntax. And as Harald mentioned, one of the advantages of this syntax, it works really well in revision control systems. Committing it to Git, you get decent diffs and merge functionality, which is an absolute nightmare in XML and Xlink, but it's actually also still quite awkward with JSON or YAML or something like that. So actually, I think text-based makes a lot of sense there.
Yes, we have also one product where we actually had a visual editor for XBRL formulas, so that a business user can, with drag and drop, they can specify formulas. But one feedback we got from the users is that they want to have a search function which searches the formulas that they generated. And so actually at this point of time, because XF did not exist at this point of time, we came up with our own, let's say, text representation of formulas. And so you can search actually the formulas very, very easy. And that's also something which is not that easy if you search XML documents sometimes. Yeah.
So actually, the very best person to answer the question about why it was text-based syntax has just entered the room, but is hiding at the back. But I will let you talk to him during the break, because we should move on to the next presentation. So thank you very much, Harald.